when you look out over a period of time, students are always changing and evolving in the music that they listen to and, what they dress in or those kinds of things. Those artifacts of being young and being a college student are always in a state of change. So I would hope that those of us who are working around them would not be so captured by our own sense of what ought to be that we don't create space for their possibilities to emerge.
What are some of the little things that you remember from your tenure here at the university?
Oh, gosh. I remember being president of the staff council. So as you might imagine, having been in student government, and then when I started working here, I was in representative stuff here as an employee as well. I was here at a point in time when we did not have collective bargaining, when we did not have unions. I remember that process of employees voting to have unions. And
wow.
Yeah, and being pretty mixed in my view about all of that, knew it would change things, and it has. But I think the spirit of the campus and our employees' commitment to the institution has prevailed throughout whatever structure we have been in. But that was a pretty big moment. Opening up of the Soraya or the Valley Performing Arts Center, those kinds of things, or going from president to president and looking at the difference in the strategic goals and objectives of one president versus another, and how do we build, or moving all the way from talking about remedial education and getting rid of that deficit language, and moving from a time when, as I say to some young people, when I came here as a freshman, you go to orientation session and inevitably someone would say, look to the left, look to the right, only one of the three of you are going to make it. I mean, there was an exclusiveness, almost thinking that not everybody could do this. That we're going to admit a lot of folk, but not a whole lot of people are going to make it through, and that's okay. Up to an institution right now that assumes and takes on almost a moral obligation to keep fidelity with young people's dreams by saying, since you met the admissions criteria, we said you could do it, and we're going to help you get to it. And that may mean we have to change some things in how we instruct, how we support you. But just the whole notion of higher education as a greater possibility across this nation, the percentage of people who go to college today is very different than when I came out as a freshman.
I remember the exclusivity if you got a college degree. But at the same time, you remember when we'd get there and think, oh, all those people in my classes who could thrive here too, but didn't try. They didn't think they could.
Or you couldn't unlock the secret of how to get it done from a process perspective. When we think about how foreboding an application was, or you're in high school and you have one college counselor on the whole high school campus. I mean, I can remember kids standing in the hallway trying to get into this one beautiful soul, but it was just that one. And so you got a little portion of some information, and you hopefully shared information with your classmates if you were lucky. But that was all serendipitous.
Yeah.
Now we have really worked very, very hard to make sure that there are systems available online and through our recruiters and et cetera, which really make it possible for young people to think early on in their journey about college going as something that is absolutely achievable and attainable.
Something you just said, making it achievable and accessible. Mm-hmm. And do you think that's part of this pushback against higher education, is that if everybody could do it, why didn't I? I don't understand it, because to me, a college education, I don't care if you take that degree and you go and you become a carpenter.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
College teaches you how to think
right.
outside your world.
Right.
It teaches you how to consume information, how to process that information.
Yeah.
And it also exposes you to different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
and people, even if you go to an all-white institution,
Yes.
because you're in literature and
Yes.
history,
Yeah.
and you're suddenly getting all these different perspectives and ideas. To me, it's like Alice in Wonderland and opening the door, or Neverland, or whatever. Going through the back of the wardrobe.
Yeah.
It just opens up
Yeah.
the world. And is it one of those few bastions where certain people think it should only be allowed to certain people? And if you open it up to people like you and me and my cousins and our children and our nephews and nieces,
well, there certainly probably are individuals who believe that as enrollments are more diverse and more people of color are getting a degree, that lowers the value of the degree. People who really want to say this is something that only some of us can have and the rest of you all do otherwise. Those individuals may be less supportive today of college going. California is very different. I mean, our conversation about most of these things that have to do with enfranchisement is very, very different than most other places in the United States. And I think that across the country, some of this is by way of cost of college going has become so unreachable for some families that they feel as if it's something that we could never get to, we could never do. And so why should I feel a sense of public support for it? That's not, again, the California story. Our story is a very, very different one. And then I think today it's just in social media and in other places, young people are able to see individuals having success who don't have a college degree. Mm-hmm. And there probably are things that we have asked people to have a college degree for that they didn't really need in their job. And there are other things that where people are truly not having them, but they're having great success. And so there'll be multiple models, and we'll settle into the right formula. I think ours in California will continue to be one where we have a very highly educated workforce and population around us.
That may explain why we have one of the largest economies in the world, even though we're only a state.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
You have seen 50 years of students. What is the continual trait that you see among all of these young people?
The yearning to be different and distinct. This is how our group does it. This is how our generation does it. This is how we roll, as they say. I think it's in the yearning of the age group that we work with, and I would not want to do anything to stem that. To continue to think about, well, okay, I know that's how you did it. Let me see if I can improve upon it, or is there a different version of it? That kind of sense of critique and that yearning for doing things more innovatively in a different kind of way, I think is in the journey and the DNA of young people in the age group generally that we serve. We have a large age population here. The typical college age student is really trying to still discover the world and make their way, to have ideas and thoughts and dreams that are respected, that are not necessarily the ones of their families, or that come in through the media systems or that they're reading about. I think that is the engine of innovation and change. And I think colleges are spaces where that can happen and where you can give students some frameworks and some theories to tinker around with and some guide rails and what have you. And then you let them go for it. You let them go and discover some things and make some things that'll make this world better.
That's something I was just thinking about, making this world better. When you started here as a student, it was in the midst of the societal unrest of the 1960s, civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the anti-war movement, where the country as a whole was re-examining who it was and who it was going to be. It's 2024. And we seem to be in the midst of it again.
Ma'am. We are. It feels that way. I mean, it's much like seeing the George Floyd murder. And that was a very crushing moment for so many reasons, because so many of us thought we were beyond that reality. And so here we are. and you see this played out right before your very eyes. And then you start really taking a look in a more critical way of where are we or where are we not? And then you look at, what can happen in a capital in terms of it almost being taken over and that kind of stuff. And you say, my goodness, what's happened to us? And so I think there's this real point of inflection for this country right now to think about where are we and being truthful with ourselves about that and trying to figure out how do we want to do this. Our country really does have to find more common things than dissimilar things. And I think that we're in a period of some churn about that. I think there's a chance that our younger folk, largely because they're in social media spaces that you and I are not in routinely, and talking with each other across different groups and boundaries that you and I don't routinely visit, that gives me hope that they may discover some ways forward that are beyond what our imagination can conceive as being likely to occur. I mean, you have to hold out that possibility. Otherwise, you think of a country that will be at itself in a very implosive kind of way.
Why do you think, as an educator, I'm asking you, why do you think change is so hard? Because I see what is happening nationally as a reaction to change. As I remind people constantly, according to the U.S. Census, 60% of Americans, not immigrants, Americans under the age of 20 are not white. And as you get younger, that percentage grows.
Yes.
So I don't care how much you push and you're resisting this. America's never going to look like what it did 100 years ago.
That's correct. I mean, it's inevitable, unless we were to just close ourselves off and say, this is it.
But even then.
That's correct, because people would be having kids. I mean, so there's a dynamic nature to this country that propels change, and it will emerge in a lot of different kinds of ways. Some we could perhaps guess at a little bit better than others, but there are things that are going to be happening. I mean, I think back sometimes about the information age. I can remember Belinda Wilson having the first talk when we brought people out to the campus to talk about, computers and information age. I'm thinking like, come on, really? And now here we are talking about AI, okay, really? Yeah. And we're trying now to talk with faculty about, there's no one ringing this bell. This is now a part of the framing for education. And the issue really is, how do you learn how to use it in a productive kind of a way? Because students are not going to not take advantage of that which is out there that can potentially be used. So we're in these spaces where there's a momentum towards change, and we get a chance to coach some of that, and hopefully things don't go off the rails. But every now and then there's a cockamamie idea or some thing that's done that's not so bright. But yeah.
California State University, Northridge, as I got reminded when I first started here, started gaining gained its reputation as the Berkeley of the South back during your time as a student.
Okay, I didn't know we had that moniker, but okay.
Oh yeah, the number of reporters back when our students had protests over Prop 209 and 187, and people would call us the Berkeley of the South in editorial pieces. And
we've had them.
Are we still? Are our students still? And I'm not going to say volatile, but still passionate about righting the wrongs in the world.
I would say yes. I would say that probably what that looks like in terms of how that passion is expressed probably looks different for this generation than it did for ours. A demonstration only happened when people got up and came to some place and it had been planned over a period of time. Students can, articulate a very powerful voice in a virtual framework, in a digital space, in a nanosecond and may be completely invisible to us, but may be a driving force for change. And so the way in which they show up, the way in which they learn, the way in which they articulate their thoughts about things, the agency that they feel about things. I mean, they can generate a large number of people to have a point of view about something which we may have struggled, back in the day to really talk almost individually to enough people to get them to rally towards a certain way of thinking. That's all changed right now. And so, there's a certain level of caution that I visit upon my thinking that, you have to not be so quick in your conclusion about students are doing X or Y, because there's a chance that when you think they're not, it's just because you're not seeing it. But I think they're very committed and passionate about things. This generation is very heavy into sustainability and those kinds of nature and environment, and I think systems of oppression and et cetera, that very naturally they do not see the justness in those kinds of things. And it perhaps is more normative to that generation. How they produce change and advance, I think they struggle with some of those pathways forward like we did. But I think they'll be okay. I do.
When you see, you work in student affairs, so you get the best job in the world.
I live there. Yeah.
You work with students constantly.
Yeah.
When you see them, when you see the new class, and I know we use the term freshmen, but the reality is some of them are returning, some of them are older.
Yes,
they're
it's
not
true.
18,
More
some
diverse.
of them are 20, or 30, or 60, or 80. Each year when you welcome that incoming class, has your perception of them changed over the years about who they are and what their potential?
Every fall, I make myself available to learn something new, and for seeing a new flavor, a new brand, a new way in which students are showing up. Because I think they do come with that. I mean, last year may look a little bit like this year, and et cetera, but when you look out over a period of time, students are always changing and evolving in the music that they listen to and, what they dress in or those kinds of things. Those artifacts of being young and being a college student are always in a state of change. So I would hope that those of us who are working around them would not be so captured by our own sense of what ought to be that we don't create space for their possibilities to emerge.
What? Now, this is a question that I'm sure your wife and Robin will be asking. How much longer are you going to be here?
Oh, God. I would not have that conversation with you before my wife.
Okay, that's about it. And you even had that conversation with Paulette, and I'm going
to... My wife will not be the last to know.
But what message do you have for future? No, I have two. Mm-hmm. What message do you have for your colleagues who graduated with you back in 74, 75?
Yeah.
What message do you have for them about CSUN and who and what it is?
Yeah. I think that they would almost find it hard to believe that we are who we are. They would be surprised to walk across the campus and see how diverse it is, how beautiful the campus is, and even the faculty that are perhaps not as diverse as we would want them to be, that they are more diverse than they experienced. They would find, most of us went to college in the 70s when pretty much so the concept was in loco parentis. Students go to college to be under the guidance of the faculty and the administration as the parents away from home. We don't operate that way today. We are enablers of young people themselves having agency and responsibility and accountability in this world. And so our relationship with students is more fluid and I think more open to students having something to do with their own destiny than may have been the case when we came along. I think that they would see some of the initiatives that we have. I mean, they would find it stunning that we have a food pantry that's open 4 days a week. I mean, we just thought you go to college and eat top ramen or you don't eat, and that was part of the rite of passage, or that you know, sometimes you didn't have a place to stay, or you slept in a car, you couch surfed, and that. But to think back then that the university would address that, today, you know, housing and food insecurity are at the core of how it is that we serve students, because we know, you know, we all took the class, Maslow's, you know, basic needs. What is basic needs? You remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Well, it's no more complicated than that. We know that in some very fundamental ways that some things have to be in place for students to be able to effectively consume the experience of college going and sustain that through to graduation. And so we try to remove those particular impediments and barriers. And so things like that they would find very, very different.
That idea of education is transformative. You talked about back in the day, you went to college and the administrators and the faculty became your parents, and no one questioned that philosophy. But now what we're talking about is we're recognizing the autonomy of the student, but providing a roof over their head and food in their tummy so they can achieve their individuality.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
We can't stop short of seeing our investment actualized. You know, in some ways, you do all of this investing in the student to prepare to go to college, and then you have them come to college and in some instances not be able to retain and progress through and graduate, not because they don't have the intellectual capacity or the thirst, but because there are these other things that are not properly aligned to create the safety net that they need to be able to study as their primary.
When I went to college, mom and dad, well, actually not in my case, but the stereotype was mom and dad were there as their safety net.
Yes.
Our students are here as individuals. They're here on, it made it sound like they're abandoned, but they're here on their own.
Yeah.
They're paying their way. They're taking care of themselves. That's so much different.
Some are. You know, there are students who really are blessed with tremendous support from extended families. And so, you know, when I talk about housing and food insecurity, that's less than 10% of our students.
Still,
okay,
when you have 40,000 students,
but that's a big number. So the vast majority of students, I think, have worked out some kind of structure that permits them to get through, but not enough, because our retention and graduation rates tell us that we're losing far too many along the way. But yeah, I mean, what it is that we open ourselves up to supporting, you know, providing as many, we have the best counselor, psychological counseling, you know what I'm speaking of here, counselor to student ratio here on this campus, better than anyone in the CSU. I'm tremendously proud of that, because I know students will come to us now. We used to beg and plead for students, let us help you. Now students know when they're in crisis and they're in trouble, and they'll come forward. And so we're better able to support them, because much of the stigma has really begun to come down around those kinds of things. And so we're changing in different kinds of ways. Our students need us to change with them.
As a Matador, how do you feel about how your university and the people in it have evolved in this 50 years?
I think we've done pretty good. I think we have. You know, I think that none of us would claim perfection. But when I talk to students, particularly our student leaders who go to conferences and et cetera, and talk to their peers on other campuses, and the misalignment between students and leadership on some of those campuses, or the things that students have as resources juxtaposed to Northridge, I just think that our students really are being served. They can be served better, but our heart is to do just that. It's not to rest on our laurels, but to continue to find ways that we can get more students to success.
I'll share an anecdote and then we'll wrap it up. But my youngest went to San Francisco State. No, neither one came to here as undergrads, because, as they said, they grew up here. Yeah. And the men in the blue shirt knew who they were. So they weren't coming here. But they're both here now as grad students. And the youngest wants to become a professor. And what she talked about was how the CSU, unlike her peers who went to other institutions, UCs and privates and things like that, truly, during the pandemic, recognized the students as individuals who may have needs and did everything they could through that virtual environment to reach out and lend a hand. And she just said, I know that's what I want to do for the rest of my life.
That's fantastic.
And I think about our faculty here and the staff. And I think about the safety nets that were woven to try to support our students.
Yes.
No, we're creating the safety net as we go forward in the middle of the crisis. But how do you feel about the safety nets we've woven prior to the pandemic and as we move forward?
Well, first let me hasten to add that my daughter went to school here as an undergraduate, and that was a nice, interesting experience with her being on campus with her dad's the dean of students. But I love her, and she made a number of wonderful friends, and we are friends with some of her classmates' parents to this very day. We know that we have to show up for our students here on this campus, that we cannot leave them on their own. We are not going to insert ourselves where we're not needed. But when students have need of something to be able to be successful in this environment, we're going to at least struggle to try to make that happen, be that financial support. We have one of the highest levels of Pell Grant awards in the country here on our campus. I mentioned mental health and other kinds of supports and services. And it wasn't like we just had some absolute brilliance about something. Inevitably, these are instances where students have come forward and told us that they needed something. Our Veteran Student Center, our Pride Center, for both of those centers, I have up in my office right to this very day petitions that were signed by the students lobbying for the creation of each of those. Students said, veterans said, we need support and help from the campus in a way that is different than the rest of the student body. We opened it up, and before we knew it, we had to relocate it or really change it because there were so many veterans in there. Our Pride Center, it's a fabulous facility, but that came from struggle from students, and we lost some students along the way even. But we listen to our students, and it sometimes takes us a minute to get it right, but we are a campus that is willing to listen and to change and to try to be better.
Isn't your tenure here an example of that?
Yeah, we kind of stay around till we get it right, huh?
No, I'm just saying, you came into the university as our students were advocating for recognition of the needs of the students of color.
Yes.
And then you became its first Black student body president.
Yeah.
And again, it's students advocating.
It's a part of what we do here.
Dr. Watkins, I thank you so very,
thank you for the opportunity.
very much.
Thanks for doing this. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us for Matador Memories. You can watch and listen to more of our podcasts on the CSUN Conversations website and become part of the CSUN Conversations community.